Our next guest, is the Chief Executive Officer of one of Europe's most successful family-owned businesses, and it has nearly 150 years of heritage as Ireland's leading food retailer, wholesale and food service company. So the reason I'm saying that is that I am going to have a little look around because there's quite a few outlets here in Dublin and pick up those kind of yummy gifts for my family. So what we're going to do now, though, is hear from the CEO, Noel Keeley, and we're going to learn how Musgrave, because we're going to be talking about Musgrave, upholds the highest food safety standards whilst also navigating our changing and complex times. So a big hand of applause now for Noel Keeley. Thank you. Over to you, Noel.
Well, good morning, everybody. As we say in Ireland, Céad Míle Fáilte, which means 100,000 welcomes to Ireland, and I hope you're enjoying your time here in Dublin. And it's a great privilege to have the opportunity to speak to you this morning. And we are here to probably talk about what is one of the most, or not the most, important issue for the food and beverage industry, not just here in Ireland, but right across the whole world. But before I do that, I thought it might just be useful to give you a little bit of a Musgrave at a glance and who we are and ultimately what we do. So, as Isabella said, Musgrave is Ireland's largest food distribution business, and we've existed for 149 years. And it also has the unusual accolade of being in seventh generation family ownership. So it's a privately held company. And we've a very big birthday coming up next year where we're all very excited when the company will be 150 years old. We operate 18 world-class brands in our markets. And we support 41,000 jobs across the island of Ireland. So that actually makes us the largest private sector employer on the island. And last year, I'm pleased to say, we reached a milestone revenue of 5 billion for the first time. Now, as I said, we operate 18 world-class brands. The markets that we currently operate in is the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, Great Britain, and Spain. We're in the retail business. So we have supermarkets. Some of you may have seen them. Some of you may have visited them yesterday. The SuperValu is our supermarket brand. We have convenience stores. The largest one, a brand called Centra, but we also have other brands in other markets. We have a wholesale food service business, and we're in both premium wholesale and mainstream. We operate cash and carries here on the island of Ireland and in the Spanish market. And we don't call them cash and carries anymore. We call them food emporiums because they have very much now been redirected towards the food service and hospitality industry. And then we also have a number of category specialist businesses in categories like patisserie, alcohol, fruit and veg, and premium Italian. So you can see why food safety might be important for a business like Musgrave. Our strategy is, we call it realizing our potential, and we've set out our ambitions right out to 2030. And we're a purpose-led business. And our purpose, as we see it, is to grow good business. Now, that sounds a bit glib, but the reality of it is it means that obviously we want to have businesses that are commercially successful. But we also want to have businesses that do good in the markets within which they operate and uphold the highest standards. So if that's why we exist, then what is it we want to do? We want to be a world-class food and beverage business, and that's very deliberate language. So why would we say world-class? Well, first of all, we have to be world-class because we are up against some of the biggest and most powerful international retailers and wholesalers in the world. Here we trade against Tesco, Lidl, Aldi, Marks and Spencer's. There's another domestic brand, Dunn Stores, who is no slouch. And then on the wholesale side, we're up against Cisco, which is the biggest food service company in the world. So if you want to play in that league, you've got to be able to play in that league. But the other reason we talk about world-class is because we believe we are. People come from all over the world to see particularly convenience retailing on the island of Ireland because it's seen as leading edge and innovative. And actually Centra, our flagship convenience brand, has won the best convenience brand in the world, not once, but twice, with the National Association of Convenience Stores, which is effectively the Oscars of convenience retailing. So that's something we're very proud of. Food and beverage, we've always been in both, but the reason we separate them is because the beverage market alone on the island of Ireland is 3 billion. So therefore, we felt we weren't getting our fair share because we were seen mostly in food. And that has seen us develop brands like Frank and Honest Coffee, which you probably may have seen or saw yesterday. It now has become the biggest selling coffee on the island. We sold 23 million cups last year, outselling all of our competitors, including the many big names that would come to mind when you think of coffee. And we only set that brand up in 2016, and it's gone from ultimately a concept to the largest selling. We have 4 pillars which underpin our strategy. First one is about maximizing our core, protecting our core business. When we talk about our core, we're talking about our business here on the island of Ireland. Second one is about developing internationally. That has seen us re-enter the market in GB and food service and our Spanish business in terms of growing it. The third one is about sustainability, which is very important to us. Given recent geopolitical developments, sustainability may find itself in somewhat of a backseat for a while, but from our perspective, it doesn't. We have to stay true to what we do. We have to do what's right. And ultimately, then it's about the transformation of Musgrave as a business. And all of this underpinned by the values of Musgrave, the values that have underpinned this business for the last 149 years. Honesty, achievement, working hard, long-term stable relationships, and not being greedy. But we're not here to talk about Musgrave per se. We're here to talk about food safety. So let's switch topics and spend a little bit of time on this. I don't think I have to tell anybody in this room that food service is a big deal. Or food safety, I should say, is a big deal. And one small incident somewhere in the world can impact millions of people. That's just the reality of this area. And unfortunately, despite the fact that the area is highly regulated, failures do occur. Now, I don't put the brands behind me up by any way of criticism. I simply put them up by way of example of what can happen. So you may be familiar with Boar's Head. It's a deli meat company in the US where they had a listeria outbreak that actually was tracked back to poor hygiene practices in a factory. 10 people died. There was 10 fatalities on the back of that. And also 600 people lost their jobs because they had to close the factory. So food safety is not an insignificant thing. It affects people's lives, not just in terms of their ability to, be poisoned or unfortunately be affected by a contaminant, but actually their livelihoods as well, if we don't get it right. And you may be familiar also in 2016, a teenager who was on a British Airways flight who had bought a pret-a-manger sandwich in the airport and who was allergic to sesame seeds, but the sandwich did not call out that sesame seeds were in the product. Unfortunately, she went into anaphylaxis on the plane, and unfortunately, she passed away because they couldn't get help to her while she was on the airplane. And actually, that resulted, for those of you who are from the UK, in the introduction of something called Natasha's Law in 2021, which effectively now requires all allergens to be labelled on any products. So I suppose the point I'm trying to make is that when food service goes wrong, it can be catastrophic. Catastrophic for people, obviously, but also catastrophic for businesses. And I'll come back to that point about its impact on businesses in a few minutes. So what are the challenges of dealing with food safety in any business? I think one of the first ones is that supply chains have become so broad and diverse and spread across now so many different markets. To hear Dirk say this morning that they have 30,000 suppliers, just think about that. And every single one of those suppliers represent a risk. Because if something's not right coming out of there, it goes into their product, and the rest is history. And it can be phenomenally brand damaging. The second challenge is to get people aligned in the organization about the importance of food safety. Food safety is kind of seen as one of those, the people with the white coats over there who look after that. Everybody has to understand the importance of this. Because when things go wrong, they can go horribly wrong. And the third issue, and this is certainly more contemporary at the moment, because of the increase in prices in commodities, is the whole area of food fraud. and particularly in areas that are easy to replicate and hard to identify. So products like orange juice, honey, olive oil, they are very prone to food fraud. And you have to be on your guard at all times because it is happening. There is somebody out there trying to make a quick buck on pushing this product into the system. So you must have a food detection approach, and it's essential, really, that you have that in your business. And without addressing those key issues, managing food safety in a business is challenging, if not impossible. So what does food safety look like for Musgrave? Well, first of all, it's fundamental to us as a business. And it actually underpins our strategy of being a world-class food and beverage business. It's fundamental to that as well. And it underpins everything that we do as a business, and indeed that we've done for the last 149 years. So our ethos is very simple. Safe, quality food every time. And that's not a soundbite. That is, everybody knows that within our business. And we never, ever take food safety as a given. We ultimately strive to maintain the very highest of standards. And not to use a cliche, but food safety is a journey. It's not a destination. You don't get to a point where, yeah, that's it, job done. Because things are changing all the time. New things are happening all the time. New risks are emerging all the time. So we continuously challenge ourselves to make sure that we're better and safer every single day. And we do the same with our retail partners because most of our stores are franchised and we're dependent on them adhering to the same standards as we do in the interest of all stakeholders, consumers, customers, and indeed our businesses. So when it comes to food safety in Musgrave, for us, regulatory requirements are a minimum, and meeting those requirements is a minimum standard. We actually build on that standard to make sure that our food is world-class and to make sure that our food is ultimately not meeting, but beating the expectations that the regulator has. And that goes for every meal, it goes for every product, it goes for every food solution that we sell. Because I suppose ensuring the safety of our consumers and customers is paramount to us over all else. And we want to take, in the same way as we do when it comes to trading our business, we want to take a world-class approach when it comes to food safety and quality. So we do have a team of dedicated food safety professionals within our business, as I'm sure many of you do. You're probably many members of the teams from various businesses around the world that are attending this conference. But the reality, and I should say to that team, they have a proven track record in dealing with these. You may remember we had the horse meat crisis in 2013. And thankfully, while we weren't contaminated, we didn't have any contaminated product, the team did an absolutely fantastic job dealing with that. But in reality, in my view, it's just not that team. I see the food safety team as the biggest team in the business because I think there's 41,000 people in it. Because each and every person, whether they're working in our stores or whether they're working in our warehouses or whatever the case might be, have a responsibility to ensure that food is safe. Because everybody fundamentally, if they don't take that responsibility, the risks are far, far higher. So as I said, we have a centralized food safety and quality team, and that team consistently apply standards right across our business. And we apply the same standards across our retail brands as we do our wholesale brands. And those standards are independently audited. I think Lloyd's are here with us today. Those standards are independently audited by Lloyd's to make sure that ultimately they are what we want them to be. In 2024, we established an expert food safety advisory group, and there are, I think, 5 people in total, 4 people in total on that group who are world-class experts in this area. Again, I think one of the members is attending this conference with us today, an ex-Mars colleague. All of our distribution centres are and must be approved to the FSSC 22,000 standard. We insist upon that because ultimately they all contain food and therefore have the risks that I've already referenced to. And we also have established now a food protection program. a food fraud protection program. So we're now actively looking at categories where we believe there's a possibility for food fraud to make sure that we're not the victims of that. Now, when you're a business that wants to grow, like we do, most of that is done by acquisition because we haven't really got a market to grow and to meet the growth expectations that we have. So in the last 18 months, we've acquired about 8 businesses. And that means that as we go through the due diligence for those businesses, that the food safety aspect of that due diligence is critically important. I don't want to buy a business that's going to cause a problem for me, even if it's commercially successful. So the food service and quality team play a crucial role now in due diligence when we purchase businesses. So let me close by coming back to the whole area of commercial risk, which I promised I would. Food safety is about the safety of people, and we must worry about it first for that reason. But it also has a huge commercial risk attached to it. And as I said earlier, it's everyone's business, but I believe it's business critical for every CEO. Patrick Wall, a previous chief executive of the Irish Food Safety Authority, famously said that, if a brand has a food safety incident, the brand that has the incident, the reputation of it goes down, and the reputation of the regulator goes up. And that's not what you want. You obviously want brand perception and brand reputation. All you have is your reputation. And one single issue can cause havoc. And again, I don't kind of call these people out as in any way critical, but these are actual cases. Bluebell Creameries in the US were fined $17.25 million in criminal penalties for a listeria outbreak. And they're not a big business. $17.25 million would be catastrophic for a business like that. And Chipotle, which you'll probably be familiar with, is a large chain of Mexican restaurants in the US. They had a number of multiple food poisoning incidents that were connected to E. coli. The stock price of Chipotle plummeted, and it took 4 years to recover. So that, if you're a CEO, that's a big deal. The board aren't going to be particularly happy about that. So no one should care more about food safety than the CEO, because people's lives are at stake, and that's really important. But the commercial reality is whole businesses are at stake as well. So thank you very much for listening. I'd like to thank the Musgrave team for hosting you here, in particular Ray Bowe, who is our Director of Food Safety and Quality and has done tremendous work with GFSI, but also here with the Food Service Authority, or with the Food Safety Authority as well. I hope you enjoy the rest of your time in Ireland and enjoy Dublin. And trust me when I tell you, the weather is not always like this. Trust me. Okay.
Hello again. I'm glad. I thought you were going to disappear off there. I was about to kind of grab you.
I wouldn't do that to you as well.
I was intrigued by what you said, and it's very true and fits into a lot of what we've been hearing so far this morning, that when we talk about food safety, it is a journey and a very dynamic one and not a destination. So if we press pause on that journey now, what would you identify today as some of the most salient food safety challenges that you're seeing?
Well, I mentioned about the fact that supply chains are becoming much broader and much more complex. So if we go back to Dirk's example, like if you have 30,000 separate suppliers, all of those suppliers represent a risk. And when you have an event, if you turn around and say, well, it wasn't me, it was this supplier that gave me products that ended up being contaminated and resulting in fatality or illness, the public aren't going to buy that. It's your name is over the door. It's your brand that's damaged. So controlling the complexity of that supply chain is critical from the point of view of making sure that those suppliers are adhering to standards that are not going to put you at risk. Another probably more contemporary problem, I mentioned it just a few minutes ago, is the whole area of food fraud. I mean, commodities at the moment have been skyrocketing. And that means that there are people out there, unfortunately, who take advantage of that and put fraudulent food into the system. And the horse meat scandal was a really good example of that, where if you recall, Tesco had a significant problem. I mean, the Tesco brand took the hit. It wasn't the people who were supplying the product.
Now, as I ask my next question, just tuck your mic around a little bit closer to your mouth because it's suddenly bent now. That's better. Which makes me kind of ask the next question, I suppose, because a lot of our conversations here are going to be about innovation, about technology. So what are you seeing that's in the pipeline or being used today that is helping you stay ahead in terms of keeping track of what's going on in your supply chain, in terms of food fraud? Is there anything key that you're seeing that's going to be really helping you in terms of that job? Because as you said, the buck stops with you.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think you've seen tremendous progress in the whole area of technology. I think the next speaker is going to talk about track and trace, which you can now see the provenance of food products. And I think that is helping. We also have a partner who is able to do kind of paperless temperature checks for us now as well. So it's becoming much more efficient and much more dynamic. And it's early days, but we're starting now to look at artificial intelligence as well, and what can we use that will be able to help us in achieving this mission. So it's getting better all the time, but at the end of the day, it's all going to come back to due diligence and tolerance. And when it comes to food safety, we simply have to be intolerant of risk. It's people's lives matter and businesses matter.
And so let's just stay with this idea of the foods kind of supply chain. What can you do as a business to help your supply chains kind of maintain these rigorous standards?
Well, first of all, we can insist that if you want to trade with us, these are the standards you're going to have to meet. Because being the biggest food distribution company on the island, we say we feed 1 in 3 people on the island. And during COVID, it was interesting that I think we realized our true purpose. We don't operate supermarkets and warehouses and distribution centres. We're actually a fundamental part of the Irish food supply chain. And if our supply chain becomes contaminated, that's a problem for Ireland. It's a problem for 1/3 of the people of Ireland. So we have to be incredibly diligent when it comes to onboarding suppliers. And then we have to be incredibly diligent when it comes to periodically checking suppliers and not giving them notice that we're going to make that check, but just arriving at the factory door and saying, we'd like to do an inspection, please. So you've got to have that rigor around the commercial relationship with the supplier, and they need to know that above all else, food safety will come first.
Okay, and I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here, and it's something we haven't discussed yet. I know it's only early days. But what about the issue of ultra-processed food? Because that obviously it seems, and there's research is still kind of like in its early stages, could pose a risk in terms of food safety. Is that something you are taking on board, and to what extent, I suppose, are consumers helping you drive changes within Musgrave, or that you're seeing industry kind of further afield and kind of a wider spectrum?
Yeah, I think we underestimate the significance of the consumer and how savvy they are. Consumers are very savvy. The
reason I say this is because Noel was showing me the Yucca app, which I had actually completely forgotten about, and how consumers are using this quite a lot.
There is now a lot of talk about ultra-processed food. While there is no hard scientific evidence yet, there is a view that we don't know the long-term effects of a lot of additives that are going into food. And there certainly are starting to make some links with illness and some of these products. So the reality of it is, if we come, why should we care about it from a commercial perspective? If we go back to Yucca, right? I mean, people are going in now and they're scanning a product and they're being told that, it has too much sugar in it, it has, this many additives in it, this many are high risk, this many are medium risk. Now, I don't know who the arbiter of Yucca is, but the reality of it is, if the consumer is looking at that product, it has the potential to impact the decision at point of sale. And my own niece told me recently that Yucca has changed her life. She just won't buy a product that gets a bad score.
And what are some of the, if we continue with this idea of a journey, what are some of the key lessons that you're bringing with you in this journey as you mitigate so many different factors to ensure that food safety is front and center. So what are some of the big lessons that help you drive forward, I suppose, kind of the vision that we were speaking about earlier on?
Yeah, well, look, we've had a number of incidents over the years. We had the horse meat, there was an incident with pork, there's always some sort of incident. And we are very diligent about doing kind of post-mortems after those issues are dealt with, to say, like, what did we learn from that, and we need to constantly look for that, because as I said when I spoke, food safety is never finished, because something new will emerge or appear, a new additive that we didn't think at the time is going to cause a problem. I mean, the regulatory authorities are doing their very best and all these additives that are approved, but do we really know what the long-term effects are going to be? It's going to take time for that to flow through. And I think the other thing we need to do is we need to bring people back to food. I mean, when we arrived on this planet, there weren't any factories manufacturing food. We ate natural foods, and there are all sorts of foods that are good for you. And we've got to get people to, think about the fact that you don't have to eat these ultra-processed products. You can make a healthier choice, which is better for the environment and better for you, and fundamentally less risky when it comes to being impacted by some sort of contaminant.
Yeah, food can be the ultimate kind of health product in some respects.
Food as medicine.
Yeah, food as medicine. I think there's Patrick Wall, who we'll be hearing from later. That's one of his kind of big things. So then something else intrigued me when you were saying that, I think you have more than 40,000 employees, and food safety is everybody's business. So how do you ensure, as CEO, that message kind of has that tentacular approach and kind of, reaches everybody right across the industry, or your industry?
Yeah, and we have an added challenge in that we directly employ about 12,000 people, and the others are employed by our retail partners. So what we do is we have processes and incentives and disincentives in place to make sure that our retail partners do what they need to do. So they have to be certified by the Food Safety Authority as having the right regime in place. And if they're not, there is a financial penalty for them in that respect. So and it's substantial. So they will make sure that they are certified. We train heavily right across our own business, but we also train our retail partner staff. So the food service and quality team will go out and ultimately work with independent retailers to make sure that staff are properly trained in the handling of food and the processing of food. And then we insist in our own business that people have to, who are interacting with food, have to go through food safety training, because, if they don't, that we record that and we'll go to them and make sure that they do. So we take every precaution, because as I said, when somebody's life, one death or fatality associated with, a food safety incident is just simply one too many. It just shouldn't happen.
Thank you so much, Noel, for your clarity. And also just reminding us all that, food safety is obviously kind of like the issue, the fundamental issue when it comes to people, to consumers, but also that it's also fundamental for business, and it's as critical. So,
absolutely.
A great conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lovely to see you.